Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's the time to get started. Welcome everyone to our workshop on EU digital regulation. My name is Van der Walle. I'm a professor at the University of Tokyo's Graduate Schools for Law and Politics. And it's my pleasure to welcome our guest today, Mr. Romain PERRAY. Mr. PERRAY is a partner at McDermott, Will and Schulte in Paris. He specializes in data, cybersecurity, and tech laws. And of course, he's a qualified lawyer, an avocat in Paris, but he also combines his work as a private practitioner with teaching at universities like Paris 1, Paris 1, Panthéon-Sorbonne, Paris 5, which is now called Université Paris-Cité, and Sorbonne Abu Dhabi. So we're very happy to welcome him to our Hongo campus in Tokyo. He has many years of engagement and practical experience with digital regulations, and so that makes him especially suited to help us understand the flurry of new EU rules, known as the EU Digital Package. And the title of his presentation is Reading the Unreadable or Deciphering the Unreadable. Indeed, it is sometimes also for Europeans like me, very hard to make sense of. There's so many things, so many rules, so much changing. And so, yeah, I really look forward to Maître PERRAY's presentation. He will speak for around 100 minutes, and then we'll have a short Q&A afterwards. I also see Habuka Sensei, who was able to join us, and a big thanks to him for setting up and launching this workshop. Unless Habuka Sensei wants to say something, I would give the floor to Maître PERRAY.
Can you hear me?
Habuka Sensei, yes, we hear you perfectly.
Yeah, I'm Hiroki Habuka, a research professor at Kyoto University, graduate school of law, and also a visiting associate professor at Tokyo University, graduate school of law and politics. I'm very happy to welcome Mr. Romain PERRAY, who was my mentor when I was working in McDermott in Paris. And he's a real expert in the comprehensive digital regulations and the governance of the European Union. So since it is really not easy for Japanese people to understand even each of the legislation, so let alone the entire complex of the regulation models. So I'm also very much looking forward to learn from Romain PERRAY Sensei, and also I wish engage discussions after his presentation. So Romain Sensei, thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Okay, well, that sets the stage nicely for the presentation. Maître PERRAY, the floor is yours.
Arigatou gozaimasu. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you so much, Habuka Sensei and Professor Van der Walle for inviting me, and I'm extremely honored to have this presentation at Tokyo University. It's a great pleasure for me to share a bit of my experience and try to make intelligible what's, as Simon said, not really intelligible even for European lawyers. So I'll try to do my best in English. Sorry, Nihongo ho hanasemasen, sumimasen. But I really want to share this because I believe it makes a lot of sense for our different region to understand better how we approach digital law. So if that's okay with you, we'll start with the presentation. It's in Japanese, no worries. I have not translated it myself, so I hope it would be intelligible already on that part. So, yes, the purpose of this presentation is to to try to read what we believe is at first sight unreadable, that is the EU digital package. And to do that, I have a specific angle that is the data lifecycle, which I believe is probably one of the angles that helps making sense to the entire EU digital package. So let's try to have an overview first on where do we come from. So I guess you are relatively familiar with GDPR. So it is the European Data Privacy Regulation that applies throughout Europe. There has been implementation into local laws with data privacy laws, but usually the essence of GDPR is applicable throughout Europe. Principle at the heart of GDPR are extremely congruent with Japanese data privacy law. And for that reason, I'm not going into details because, as you know, there is adequacy between Europe and Japan as far as data privacy is concerned. So we have relatively same principles and are likely to apply in the same way. What is the purpose of GDPR is to ensure the highest level of protection of individuals regarding the processing of their personal data. What are we talking about? We are talking about names, IDs, social security number, health data, anything that relates to an individual, not an organization, and somehow that would provide a bit of information on that individual. Whether it's true or not doesn't matter. It's just that it needs to be related to that individual. So it could be an assessment on individual or that type of situation. What matters is that with GDPR, the purpose of GDPR is, again, to protect individuals as far as the data flows, meaning that data needs to circulate between several stakeholders, several organizations, that could be companies, that could be administrative bodies or public authorities. It doesn't matter really. What matters is that it can circulate, but somehow individuals have a bit of control over that data. It does not need to have ownership because there is no ownership right on your personal data. There is more like personal rights, meaning that you have the capacity to control who access what, how, and to what extent. Basically, that is the essence of GDPR. So, but I would say on that front, it's merely fundamental rights instead of free movement and competition. The EU digital package is basically the complete opposite, or somehow an opposite to that. It's the philosophy of the EU digital package is very different. It supports free movement and competition. And the thing is that it's not like a fundamental right regulation or regulations, I would say, but it's merely to find out a bit of balance between both. Because the essence of the EU digital package is data, it's knowledge, and knowledge, it's growth, economic growth. And this is where there is a need for circulating that data among the different stakeholders. Of course, GDPR is very data privacy centric, while the EU digital package does not apply only to personal data. It applies to a larger variety or larger types of data that includes personal, non-personal, industrial data. So it goes further from that side. So somehow the EU digital package and GDPR, they are two different aspects of the same on the same principle, but with diverging, I would say, orientation. But usually we require the application of both. So somehow there is a bit of better balance between the economic interest for circulating data instead of protecting data of personal data of individuals. So we are somehow in the way between. That said, if you try to summarize, and at least is the way I do, what is the essence of the EU digital package? From a data perspective, I would say that there are three different angles to the EU digital package. First, there are regulations that apply to the data sources, regardless of whether that data is personal or non-personal. You have two different fields: public sector, private sector, and then your different regulation or legislation that applied depending on the situation. So for example, the DGA, the Data Governance Act, applied to both public and private sector. GDPR is the same. Data Act is the same. The only thing that it applies to those sectors in a different way. That is the data sources, okay? That data goes through intermediaries, stakeholders, organization. Same, there is a public-private divide. For example, on the Data Act, you have public sector body that want to collect data for public interest purposes. And then on the other side, within the private sector, you have connected products manufacturers or connected service providers that are in the private sector that are also subject to the Data Act. What is key here is the kind of a competition angle to it, because data, again, it's knowledge, but knowledge is also power. And that power needs to be balanced, especially with large actors such as big tech companies that gather a lot of information on individuals or on professionals, organization, and they gather that data from different data sources and are able to improve their knowledge on a large variety of situations. So data going through platforms, stakeholders, organization, and ultimately it goes to technology and it feeds AI because that would be determining for AI technology algorithm to run their analysis based on that data. If you do not add data, the algorithm AI will not work in itself. So this is why it needs to be fed, and this is the entire life cycle of data with the AI Act, and there is an EHDS as well, but I'm not talking about the health regulation here because it's far too specific. I'm going to focus my attention on the most, I would say, essential acts within the EU digital package. That entire life cycle is, I think, it works, but only if you have security, if it's secured. This is where cybersecurity, that is not strictly speaking from the, or say within the EU digital package, but it's just a side to the EU digital package, but is a determining factor to secure the life cycle of data. We have two different legislation. First is what we call the NIS2 directive that applies to critical and highly critical organization, such as telecom, water supply, waste organization, financial institution, and so on. And then you have the Cyber Resilience Act that applies to connected product. So first, at the, I would say, industry level, that is NIS2 directive, I would say the most essential industries within the EU. And then you have at the product level with the Cyber Resilience Act to apply cybersecurity rules here. So let's dig into the EU digital package and to provide you with an overview on the 6 key acts within that EU digital package. Today, I'm going to talk about 5 of them. As I said, I'm not talking about the EHDS, just to provide you with a bit of overview on that, because it's very, very specific and it's applicable, but it's not enforced yet, strictly speaking. So first, the first act that's been adopted under the EU digital package is called the Data Governance Act, the DGA. 3 different aspects. It supports reuse of specific protected public sector data, that is it's open data, governmental data. Then you have another chapter that increase trust in data intermediation services, and the last one that fosters data altruism across the region. I'm going to unpack this right after. It has been adopted in May 2022 and applicable starting from 24 September 2023. Interestingly enough, you can see that it covers, I would say, very different topics within the same act. Public sector data is somehow pretty different from intermediation services or altruism, though they're both platforms or intermediary bodies. Second is the DMA, the Digital Market Act. The DMA regulates very large digital platforms designed as gatekeepers. Essentially, it applies to big tech company, TikTok, Google, Amazon, Meta, etc., etc. And it provides a list. It lists a series of obligations to ensure fair competition. So here there is a very strong antitrust philosophy to it. Adopted in July 2022 and applicable from to May 2nd, 2023. It's adopted and it's into application already. The DSA, the Digital Service Act, it requires online intermediary services to regulate online content. It's not very new, but we have strengthened the legal regime of that I would say, field, with more transparency and to restrict information in order to support trusted e-commerce activity. So again, it's better. Transparency would help to have consumers trust e-business activities. But I would have a focus on the data angle here. The Data Act. It aims at facilitating sharing, access, and reuse of industrial data. It could be either non-personal or it could be personal, so that sharing and reuse between consumers, businesses, and where necessary, public authorities. I'm going to unpack that one. It's probably one of the most complex acts I have ever worked on in the data industry. It's barely understandable even for lawyers that have been in this area for 20 years, as I am. But I try to make it intelligible in a few minutes for you. The AI Act, it aims at regulating AI system through a risk-based approach, adopted in May 21st, 2024. It partially entered into application because there are several steps for entering into application. I'm going through the AI Act as well, but merely again from a data perspective. And the EHDS, so it's the Health Data System Regulation. I'm not going to talk about that very much. Basically, what matters here to understand it aims at empowering individuals to control their health data, enabling the reuse of health data for research and innovation, and improving healthcare deliveries while ensuring strict data security and access conditions. Again, what you could see is that data is knowledge, it's growth, this is where we do better, understand better, because we have access to that data, and we can reuse that data in very different ways. So it's all about enabling circulation of information. So let's try to dig into each respective acts. The first one is the Data Governance Act. So to summarize the Data Governance Act, the purpose of that act is to provide, I would say, a European common data space. What is difficult is that we have now data business models with very strong stakeholders, with big tech company. So let's have Meta, for example. They have Instagram, they have WhatsApp, they have Facebook, and they could gather data from those different data sources and then improve knowledge and retarget data, retarget individuals with, profiling and a better targeted advertising mechanism and systems. The problem is that we have so strong big tech companies on the market, but we are not able to provide any alternative to that. And that is merely the purpose of the Data Governance Act. The purpose of the Data Governance Act is to provide alternative mechanism, alternative platforms. This is where it regulates what we call a common data space, and that is the general philosophy of the DGA, but that data space is divided into several data spaces, depending on a very sectoral approach. You have one for health, one for payment, one for mobility, energy, and so on. As many as we need. It could be environment data, doesn't matter. What we need is that every market, so to speak, would have a, I would say, data space that's regulated and with different leverages, with different restrictions, because the market is structured differently. Regulating personal data is not exactly the same as regulating payment data or financial data, because the needs are different and the need for protection are different. So there is a kind of a high-level common general strategy with the data space and basic principle, and then those principles or mechanism are implemented somehow differently from one industry to another, plus there is an additional layer of complexity that it's implemented into local law. But because the DGA is a regulation, the room for local variation are limited under local laws. So it's possible for European countries to have their, I would say, adjustments, but it doesn't go that far so that it would apply something very different from the DGA in itself. Okay? Those common data space and common data spaces rely on a principle that is called FAIR, which is findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable data. You need to have data that circulates. Any obstacle to that, any constraint to that are considered as a violation or at risk, so that we need to be very limited or exempted. But the purpose, again, is to make data available. And of course, let's say that data is available, but you get that data, but you cannot read that data. From a technical standpoint, interoperability would be key, because all the interest for that regulation is that ultimately that data is reusable. So this is why you have to, the DGA, the purpose of the DGA is to lift all those obstacles for sharing data. So basically, the Data Act relies on a three-headed chapter. First is the reuse of certain categories of data held by public sector bodies. Surprisingly, this is optional. It's not an obligation. Why is that? It's because they want to support better circulation of public data. The thing, we already have regulation, we already have directives, but essentially it was not like very strong directive, and the logic beyond that is to provide a kind of framework that facilitates the reuse, but is not like compulsory, so to do not push too hard on public bodies, because enabling data sharing is it's very expensive. The problem is that public bodies in Europe do not have that amount of money just to be compliant. So this is why basically they are supporting those efforts, but not as requiring it. So the purpose of this chapter is to have an additional exemption regime to the Open Data Directive. Basically, it's to provide a framework for sharing, for enabling public sector bodies to share data they have, but that are commercial, that they are subject to commercial confidentiality. So let's say, oh, I have data, but it's protected already. The thing is, I can. It would matter to share that data with other organizations to improve knowledge. But the problem, because it's confidential, it's very difficult to share. So it's basically how you would share that confidential data with a limited numbers of stakeholders so that they can reuse that data in time. Would you apply anonymization, pseudonymization? Would you get access to that data with a secure processing environment, either on site or remotely? This is exactly the purpose of that chapter. As you can see, it's completely different from the two other chapters. Two other chapters are the chapter 2 is on the data intermediation service, and the third is on data altruism. What is that? Again, is to provide alternative to every other business model data platform. So we have, again, those big techs, search engines, we have video sharing platforms, et cetera, messaging system provider as well. But those organizations, they make money with your data. Here, there is something more agnostic, more neutral. The data intermediation service business is that it's to enable companies to create a platform for sharing raw data. So I'm an individual. I want to sell my data to a company. I go to that data intermediation service platform or service provider, and they will share that data through the platform. It's not someone that reuse my social network data to know me better, to combine that data with my use of a connected device, and then to, I would say, enrich that data and sell it to someone else. It's not like that. It's more like a market for sharing raw data. Data altruism, it's another alternative to the data-centric business models, such as the data brokers, et cetera. This basically is a result from the COVID-19 and the pandemic. What happened during the pandemic is that we had people who wanted to share the data, health data, employment data. They just wanted, it's a kind of a civil society effort. So who want to use that data to better, to know better how the pandemic is developing, who can do what, et cetera. But we did not have any rules for that. It was like, it was at risk because that was personal data. I'm an individual. I want to share my data. Okay, I can do what I want, although I do not have ownership, but I have control. And part of my control is to share data with someone else. I cannot do it because there is no legal framework for it. So both mechanism, data altruism and data intermediation services are here for providing more agnostic platform that are alternative for those big tech company, and the purpose of so the DGA is, okay, there is a data business economy, but if we do not provide an alternative to that, we cannot offer to every individual or an organization a sustainable mechanism for it. So that is the purpose of the DGA. In practice, to be honest, it's not a real success for the moment. Data altruism, for example, it's a lot of obligation, but because you cannot make money and that would be essentially non-profit organization, what would be the business model for that? It's difficult. Same for data intermediation services, because basically you get data from individuals or from organization, and then you are a market so that you can share, you can sell that data to someone else. But what is the value for it? Selling raw data is not that easy. So it has not been a huge success for the moment. It may change in time, but it's still relatively slow on that side. Next act is the DMA, the Digital Markets Act. Here, the purpose of the DMA is to regulate unfair competitive behavior, have providers of what we call core platform services designated as gatekeepers. We are talking about a very strong antitrust regulation. What are the stakeholders that fall within that category? Online intermediation services, online search engine, online social network services, video sharing platforms, number-independent interpersonal communication service, operating system, cloud companies. Okay? So we're talking here about the top big tech, TikTok, Meta, Amazon, Google, etc., etc. The problem we had for years is that we approach data businesses from a quantity perspective and not from a quality perspective. So the purpose of the DMA is basically to consider that you have a dominant position on the market because of that. You meet that prerequisite, etc., etc. You have significant impact on the internal market. You are an important gateway, an entrenched and durable position. You have, of course, here different thresholds, and the thresholds could change in time. But here, because of you're falling into that category, then you have specific obligation. And among those specific obligations, there is a strong focus on the data or access to different type of data. So among the obligation and the restriction for gatekeepers, there are 4 that especially focused on data. First of all is to avoid data concentration by requiring user consent. This is very GDPR-centric. What is the basic, the essence of that? Again, I'll give you the example with Meta. Meta has different activities: Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp. What happened, especially in Germany, they gather information from those 3 different data sources. But to be honest, basically, they would know everything about you. How do you use your mobile phone, WhatsApp messaging system? How do you use your Facebook? How do you use your Instagram? At what time? So it provides them with a very, I would say, not 360-degree overview on the way you use a connected device or just your mobile phone or any other terminals, but it's a very large overview, and it helps them to feed their algorithm and to target better. Here, the thing is that as a user, I'm in connection with one service, WhatsApp, Instagram, Facebook, 3 different services. And it's very difficult to, I would say, not understand, because a lot of us know that, but to make it intelligible that anything you do on those digital service that is combined and it's stored, analyzes, and they have your history of browsing, of using each of those services. And if you are not completely aware of that, how you may not agree with those services gathering your information first, analyze this information, and maybe retargeting you for any reason. You don't want that. So this is what consent is determining, and it's consent. You would have different, I would say, silos of communication. Collection is first, storing is another one, and combining that data, it's another one as well. So here we have an antitrust regulation that rely on a completely different law, the data privacy, and it requires a specific consent to that. So this is where we can see there is more imbrication between, I would say, different different legal environment. Competition plus data privacy here are converging together to reach a highest level of protection. Same with the data portability requirement. What is data portability is somehow a key element within competition. I do not have ownership of my personal data, but I can make my data portable from one provider to another. That would be a determining principle that also apply within the Data Act as well. Sharing of search data with third-party online search engine, same. If you are a search engine, you are already in dominant position, and that would matter a lot, so that you can share that information to improve knowledge. And there is a prohibition on using business user data competing with other gatekeepers. So the purpose here is that you're not allowed to prevent those gatekeepers to other gatekeepers to access that data.